Vice President Kamala Harris recently shared her thoughts on how she understands culture. Let's listen.
Culture is a reflection of our moment and our time, right? And present culture is the way we express how we're feeling about the moment. And we should always find times to express how we feel about the moment that is a reflection of joy, because it comes in the morning. We have to find ways to also express the way we feel about the moment in terms of just having language and a connection to how people are experiencing life.
Yikes, Jessica. I don't know why they keep sending Kamala Harris anywhere. They should just hide her somewhere in the West Wing at this point, because it seems like every time she speaks in public, we end up with one of these weird circular scenarios where she can't even seem to finish a sentence, let alone a thought.
Yeah. If we find Xanax in the White House, I think we know whose that one would be.
Yeah, she's probably not the cocaine culprit, but maybe some other drug.
Yeah, no, that seems like downers to me. She can put a lot of words together in a way that makes absolutely no sense. I don't know how someone can say so many words and make 0 points whatsoever. And then when she trails off, just to come in with a random phrase that doesn't mean anything at all. You know, it comes in the morning, Amber. What? I'm sorry, this is the Vice President of the United States. I'm kind of inspired. I just want to say random phrases that make no sense within my commentary and just let everyone just project their own meaning onto them. You know, Kamala's got the cutting board out and she's chopping onions.
It's pretty funny to go back to the Democratic primary campaign when Kamala was basically the favorite of the Democratic National Committee and they were pushing her very hard. And then she just crashed and burned in the first debate and ended up having to be one of the first individuals to drop out. And I remember the media and the Democratic officials at the time being so confused as to why this happened. They kept claiming it was because America wasn't ready for a black woman and it was all of the inherent white nationalism in our country. And now that we've actually seen her perform on the national stage in this position of power, it's become quite obvious why she did not do well in that election. And shockingly, as we know, the vice president is usually the individual who's considered next in line for the presidency after the president steps down or finishes out their 2 terms. And so I'm sure the Democratic Party is scrambling, trying to think of how the heck they can get her out of that position so that she is not the eventual runner-up to Biden.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the Democratic establishment imagined this would go. We saw how Kamala performed on the campaign trail. To then see her fail miserably and still make her the darling of the Democratic Party and want her to be vice president is absolutely mind-blowing. The way that they keep picking candidates that have proven to be unpopular, that have proven to fail and embarrass the Democratic Party suggests that maybe it is their plan to fail. Like maybe that is the strategy, to put up candidates that just barely can beat Republicans who are oftentimes very unpopular. Do you know how bad you have to be at picking candidates and running the primary process to decide that Bernie Sanders, who was polling 60% in a race against Trump, and still want Hillary to be your candidate? It's just so clear that they're picking people who will uphold neoliberalism instead of running a party that will win elections. That's their priority. That's why they exist. And that's why a lot of people are deciding to leave the Democratic Party. But how can you watch this and not be embarrassed?
Exactly. And this is the same exact thing that they're doing this time around, where they're trying to suppress RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. They don't want to hold a debate because they don't want real competition. They don't want Biden being challenged. They don't want any outsider candidates being able to bring new ideas to the stage. And I think this is true in both parties. The Republican establishment also hates the idea of outsider candidates. They hated Trump in 2016. They hated people like Rand Paul, anyone who challenged the military-industrial complex. They hated people who did real investigations in regards to COVID as opposed to just giving lip service to all of these different ideas. And so across both political parties, I think it's such a shame and a detriment to the American people that they're so insistent on propping up these unqualified, uninspiring, mediocre people who have no business being in power, but because they hold the quote-unquote right ideas, they're somehow put into place and propped up by the regime.
Yeah, I think Kamala is such a good example of this thing that I've noticed that's a trend among political commentators, among politicians, among anyone who speaks publicly about issues that matter to people, is that when you try and make everyone happy, and when you try and say things that are non-controversial and agreeable, you start to not make any sense at all. Kamala Harris could have said something that actually was substantive about what the definition of culture is. Culture is the present moment. Culture is the vibes. What are you talking about? No one knows what you're talking about. You're not making clear or coherent points. And I think when you try and make everyone happy, you're either going to say things that contradict each other, or you're going to say things that make no sense at all. And Kamala Harris is definitely the latter. And I think Biden oftentimes is the latter as well. Their way of speaking is unfortunately very similar. Incoherent sentences, you trail off, and then you come back around with something that sounds like a turn of phrase, but no one's actually heard it before. Joy comes in the morning might be a phrase that's from a different culture than the one I grew up in, but it's certainly not one that I recognize. So it seems to me a lot like Biden. It's the move of this administration.
Right. It's almost like these are people who are haunted by their past policy positions and have no interest in trying to defend them. Like in Kamala's case, she completely fell apart when she was pressed by Tulsi Gabbard on the fact that she was a prosecutor who would go after people for truancy and other minor crimes, but maybe not some of the bigger stuff. She put a lot of people in jail for minor marijuana offenses. And Biden has a history of being more of a blue dog Democrat, and now he's trying to govern as a progressive, or at least pay lip service to the progressive wing of the party. And they haven't ever explained where their evolution came from, and instead they just shout out empty platitudes. Kamala's way of relating to the American people now is talking about how much she likes yellow school buses and how she loves Venn diagrams. Elsewhere in this presentation at the Essence Fest, she talked again about how she loves Venn diagrams. You know, the two circles that interlap. We all know what Venn diagrams are, Kamala, and I promise you that this is not a passionate topic for most of the American people. They want to hear basically about anything else that moves you.
Yeah, taking no position at all. Then in times where you have to run for office, taking the progressive position, they really ran a progressive policy platform, and that is how they won. And then they did not govern in that way at all. And crazy that these two could be running mates. When Biden was someone that advocated for the segregation of buses, and Kamala made this huge moment on the debate stage. Like, I had to take a different bus. It meant that I had a lot of more travel time to get to school. It was a hassle for me out in California. I was the victim of your busing policy that you advocated for. Then people looked into it a little bit and found that actually the legislation Biden voted for and advocated for on the floor of Congress would not have affected Kamala's busing situation. Still, you have these two with very insane track records. Tulsi Gabbard pointing out the truancy situation. Kamala Harris can't get upset about her not being able to get to school because of certain busing, and then penalize parents who were not able to get their kids to school and make it a criminal act. Those two things can't exist in the same moral or ethical structure. And so I think you're absolutely right that these are people that are haunted by their past policy decisions. They haven't said how their thinking has changed to arrive at their current platform, and that leaves them with literally nothing to say at all. So this election cycle is going to be a very interesting one. Hopefully they come up with some kind of explanation, because just listening to platitudes constantly, I don't think is going to go over well for anyone.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, Kamala Harris even made a T-shirt off of that moment. I believe something along the lines of "That little girl was me." So unfortunately, that wraps it up for today's show. Jessica, it's been a pleasure as always.
It has. You know, joy comes in the morning, Amber.
Well, make sure you get a good night's sleep then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. All right, that's it for us. We'll see you all next Friday.